Hello my dear viewers, and welcome to day 10 of the 12 Days of Death. We are in the home stretch now. We're getting very close to the end. And trust me, you're definitely going to want to stay tuned for day 12, because something very big will be happening on day 12. But until then, let's get to today's episode.
Checking something out, Sayla. It's more than meets the eye.
Get your butt back to White Base. If there's trouble, we can't send backup.
Let's roll.
It's an enemy almost.
I told you.
That's too fast. There you are.
Vile Decepticon, I have been in battle for countless eons. Not today.
Only one shot left. I hate gravity. I'm just bad.
I must stand, so you shall fall.
So, Optimus Prime versus Gundam. Well, this is one I have been expecting for a long time, because this is another one of those Goku versus Superman situations where you have the West versus Japan. You have the Western version of a character that came from Japan that a lot of people like. Now, I will say, at least in regards to this one, it's not as bad as Goku vs. Superman because they don't fuck it up that bad. Although, I will say that this mashup, though I understand why they did it, it does make sense. It's the whole Gundam versus Transformers, because Transformers was inspired and based on a lot of old anime, mecha anime like Gundam, so I understand why they wanted to do it, because these are two very classic, iconic shows from two very different countries, and with two very different interpretations. So I get why they wanted to do it. And that's fine, I suppose. I mean, on paper, this matchup sounds like a match made in heaven. It's just that in execution, it unfortunately doesn't play out the same way because, as you have seen, Optimus Prime is too fucking powerful. Optimus Prime is straight up broken. I've had chats with some of my fans, and especially people in the Versus community. One of them in particular has told me just how powerful Optimus Prime is. And yeah, while I'm pretty sure Death Battle royally screwed up Optimus Prime's scaling, like, the research itself seemed fine in regards to some of the feats. However, Optimus Prime is far more powerful than even Death Battle said him to be. Again, I won't go full into a power scale of Optimus Prime. Maybe that's a video for another day, why Optimus Prime is more powerful than even Death Battle thinks, wink. But this is a really bad matchup when you look at it from the sense of power. Now, if you look at it from the perspective of what Optimus Prime and Gundam represents as a larger whole, it makes sense for this matchup to happen. But again, given how overpowered Optimus Prime is, to me it just doesn't seem very fair to have these two fight each other. And similar to Spyro vs. Crash, Death Battle makes very little attempt to actually hide the power disparity between these two, which I'll at least give them credit for at least being honest. At least Death Battle was being honest that Gundam had very, very little chance against Optimus Prime, but honesty still isn't going to hide the fact that this is pretty much another one-shot Death Battle, which a lot of people in the Versus community do sometimes have a problem with, because it can get very difficult to be invested in the matchup itself if you're just thinking to yourself, this character has no chance, and Optimus would just fucking flick Gundam and he would die because he's that absurdly broken. So, I mean, it's a very tricky situation with this matchup, because it's both a good matchup and a shit matchup at the same time. This is a very awkward position I'm put in, because I want to say this matchup sucks purely based on the power disparity between these two, but I can't ignore the reasons why people wanted this matchup to happen, and I can't necessarily play ignorant as to why. There have been times where I've seen really, really bad Death Battle matchups, and I tried to play ignorant and think, why would anyone want this? But there usually is some kind of reason, and this one, I do understand it, I do get it. I don't think a lot of the people who ask for this matchup necessarily are aware of like power scaling and all that stuff, because if they did, they probably would have been able to answer their own question that, yeah, the Gundam would have lost pretty easily. However, with that out of the way, and with some of the bullshit scaling in regards to Optimus Prime, who is much more powerful than Death Battle stated, this episode is fine. My only complaints mostly pertain to the matchup, which is not 100% shit, make no mistake about it. This matchup is only terrible because Optimus Prime is too powerful. If Optimus Prime wasn't so broken, I could see this being a near perfect matchup. And this does have the potential to be a near perfect death battle, but there are a couple of things they fucked up, such as the matchup, which I understand is not 100% death battle and the audience's fault, that Optimus Prime is so broken. I understand that there's not much they could do about that. But also there is, like I said, some power scaling concerns in the analysis, and if I can find some videos that go over how much like they lowballed Optimus Prime, then I'll absolutely put them in the description if you're interested. But everything else is great for the most part. The animation is incredible, although the only complaint I have about the animation, it's a very small thing, but the way the character who's piloting the Gundam looks when he's inside the mech, something about it just looks out of place. It looks very stiff and like it's not supposed to belong there. I don't know how to explain it, but it's just very odd at times. Like when it goes back and forth between him, it just kind of feels almost like there's just a static 3D model in there that doesn't even feel like it even belongs. But outside of that, everything else in the animation is incredible, and apparently this was one of the final death battles that Torian ever animated before leaving Death Battle, and he also gave teaching lessons to the new 3D animators. And for his final animation, it looks good, just as good as always. Like, usually when Torian does the animation, they're usually some of the best animations. So that is at least really good. At least they made the fight look really cool. And the music, while I don't like the music, the soundtrack is perfect when you really think about it. It's a soundtrack that sounds a little bit cheesy, like it came out of the 80s and 90s when these two shows were at their height and when they ended up blowing up. So stylistically it makes sense, it's just that I'm personally not into that type of music. I find it to be cheesy, but that's more of just my personal taste. The soundtrack choice is perfect though, and I get exactly what they were going for. So this is an instance where Death Battle got the soundtrack perfect. Although I do think it would have been nice for them to incorporate a little bit of the iconic Transformer theme in this fight, and maybe a little bit of the Gundam theme if there is any iconic Gundam theme song. I do think that would have been nice to hear, even if it was only for like a few seconds towards the end of the fight. I do think it's a little bit of a shame that they don't use the iconic Transformer theme that everyone knows and loves. But again, that's just a little thing, because the soundtrack they did pick, it makes sense, and I get that Death Battle wants to use more original music, because copyright on YouTube can be a huge pain in the ass, and I'm sure that's most likely the reason why Death Battle doesn't use music from some cartoons, anime, or video games, because sometimes companies can be little bitches about their copyright. So that's pretty good, and the results are fine. I mean, pretty much they got everything right. Outside of the lowballing with Optimus Prime, everything seemed legit from what I'm able to understand. So overall, this is a pretty well made Death Battle, and the dialogue and one-liners is really, really good. They use some of the best, most iconic one-liners with Optimus Prime, and they are very glorious to hear, because Optimus Prime has always had some of the best one-liners of any 80s cartoon character. So I love the dialogue between these two characters, and even the Gundam gets some pretty good lines in there, although Optimus obviously steals the show, as he should. So I think I'm trying to think of like other positives and negatives, because the reason why I kind of avoided reviewing this episode is it's not necessarily that I didn't want to review it, it's that I don't really have a whole lot to say about this episode, because again, it's not really bad enough for me to have a lot to talk about. It's really good, and it's usually difficult for me to find a lot to talk about in these positive episodes, because mostly everything is great. The animation is great. The dialogue and voice acting is really, really good. I mean, outside of some problems in the analysis and the matchup, which can be mostly ignored in some cases, it's very difficult for me to look for things to talk about. But again, this is really great, so I will say that this is another near perfect episode, and I will give it a 9 out of 10. I was thinking about giving it an 8, but most of the issues I find with this Death Battle aren't breaking by any means, because while they do lowball Optimus Prime, they don't do it in a disrespectful way, like, say, something like Naruto versus Ichigo, or Gaara versus Toph, where they lowball the characters to such a humiliating degree that it's absolutely insulting, and the reason why they lowballed him was just because they wanted to have a certain character win rather than being realistic with who should win. And while this is a pretty much one-shot, I do understand why maybe they wanted to lowball Optimus Prime a little bit, because they knew that if they just had Optimus Prime just be like just how broken he is, like if he actually fought with his full power, the Gundam wouldn't even be able to touch him. So if you had you would have had a lot of people in the Versus community talking about how stupid it is that the Gundam is even being able to damage Optimus Prime, considering how powerful he is, and he should end him in one punch, you know what I mean? And I'm sure people in the Versus community that are more involved with power scaling will understand what I mean by that. But to the casual observer, they most likely won't notice, because the casual observer to Death Battle just wants to see a cool fight, and they do get that. However, if you are much bigger into the Versus community, I can see the analysis and matchup being a little bit annoying for some people. But since there are far more positives here than negatives, I don't really think it is deserving of any kind of like low score. I do believe it is very high, but due to the fact that there are some problems here, I can't give it a 10 out of 10, although it is so very close. So let me know what you think of Optimus Prime versus Gundam. Do you think that I missed anything? If so, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for day 11.